We saw more interesting NHL trades as Seattle and Tampa hook up on a complete blockbuster. Pittsburgh's made a couple more moves, and Buffalo has signed one of their pending UFAs. We'll go to all the moves coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End to End Hockey channel. Now before we begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. We know just of you guys, so if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button down below. It really does help out the channel, and we're closing in on 500 subscribers, so don't forget to hit the subscribe button and hopefully leave a comment down in the comment section below discussing all that I was discussing in today's video. So in today's video, another interesting trade video. This one might be coming up either Wednesday night or Thursday morning. I have a couple of videos in the queue right now, so I'm not exactly sure when it's going to come out, but we saw a couple of intriguing deals late on Wednesday night. I want to touch on all these trades here, but first I want to touch on one signing that happened over the past while that took a potential trade bait candidate off the board. Now, he wasn't on my trade bait board, but he has been mentioned a little bit, and that is Jordan Greenway. Greenway was acquired, I think, not last year, but the year prior's deadline from the Minnesota Wild. Has been a really solid middle 6'4" throughout his career. He didn't really fit in overly well towards the end of his tenure in Minnesota, so they traded him to Buffalo, got his fresh start. So far this year, Green has had a whole bunch of injury troubles that's kept him out of game action for quite some time. He recently just got back into game action, but the Sabres have seen enough that they decided to sign him to an extension. The 28-year-old winger gets a 2-year contract extension with AV of $4 million up against the start of next year. So this is an interesting signing. I thought for sure Greenway would have been moved. He was one of those guys I thought Buffalo would definitely move on from. I was not expecting him to come back to Buffalo, but obviously Buffalo seems to value him, so it's a little bit surprising to me, at least, maybe not to one of you guys, but Greenway is an interesting addition there for the Sabres to keep around instead of moving. So far this year, only had 3 goals and 8 points in 26 games due to those injuries we were talking about. Last year had 10 goals and 28 points, which was only 4 shy of a career high in 67 games. So had he been healthy the entire season last year, could have maybe had a career high in points. So like I say, still a solid guy who can put you up between 25 and 30 points, can put you up between like maybe 5 to 10 goals, maybe even a 15 goal season would be his limit. He can still play like a physical style game, like a third line, so I can see why the Sabres want to keep him. He's also a really good veteran presence for a younger team, but it's just a little bit confusing to me. So interesting note there, but the Buffalo Sabres are keeping Jordan Greenway around, even though he was scheduled to hit unrestricted free agency. And going over to 3 interesting trades we saw over the past little while before Wednesday evening hit. At this point, we saw 3 massive deals. The first one was a complete and utter blockbuster between the Kraken, the Bolts, and also the Detroit Red Wings. And the trade is as follows. The Detroit Red Wings, for retaining 25% of Yanni Gourde's contract, are getting a conditional 2025 4th round pick from Tampa Bay. And then the Tampa Bay Lightning are acquiring Oliver Bjorkstrand at his full cap hits, Yanni Gourde with 75% of his contract retained, the Seattle Kraken's 2026 5th round pick, and young prospect Kyle Aucoin from the Detroit Red Wings. And in exchange, the Seattle Kraken acquire a 2026 conditional 1st round pick, a 2027 conditional 1st round pick, a 2025 2nd round pick, and forward Michael Eyssimont. This is a blockbuster deal of ginormous proportions. So let's start with the Detroit Red Wings side because it's not too much. The Red Wings side, I think, upwards of $10 million in cap space, so they had room to play with to try and get some more free assets. So they retained 25% off Gourde's contract, which I think rounds out to about $1.2 million, and they get a 4th round pick in return. The condition is they'll get the better of the Edmonton Oilers or Tampa Bay Lightning 4th round pick. The Lightning do have both of those picks, so the better of those two will go to Detroit in this pick. So it's a pretty decent move there for the Red Wings. They retain just over $1 million off Gourde's contract, and they get a free 4th round pick for doing it. These are sort of the similar things that we see when they're 3-team deals. It's usually a 4th or 3rd round pick getting moved to the broker team, the third party team. So I think this is a really good pickup there for Detroit. But for the Seattle and Tampa, this is a massive move. We'll start with the Tampa Bay side of things. We know that they are not opposed to flipping away 1st round picks, 2nd round picks, just any draft picks in general. So not too surprised to see that. And Michael Eysimont's a decent player, but he's more of a bomb 6 guy. So it's not too surprising to see him get dealt. But they get a massive return here. So they get a draft pick back, 2026 5th round pick. At that point, a couple of years down the road, Seattle might be a decent team. So I'm not sure if that'll be a higher 5th round pick or a lower 5th round pick. pick, but it does give the Bolts a little bit more draft capital in their arsenal. They also get young D prospect, left shot defenseman, who was a 6th round pick back in the 2020 draft, Kyle Aucoin. Aucoin's currently playing over in the NCAA, has no NHL contract, so he's an unsigned prospect. He has 2 goals and 4 points in 24 games over the NCAA. So he's doing all right in the NCAA, not an overly productive player, so maybe he could eventually be a solid third pair defenseman there for the Bolts, but it's another prospect that the Bolts have in their room. And then they get 2 massive upgrades to their top 9. They got Oliver Bjorkstrand and they get Yanni Gourde. We'll start with Yanni Gourde. So they get Gourde at 75% of his contract retained. They had about $6 million to spend around the trade deadline. This takes up almost all of their $6 million, but they only get Gourde at about $1.2 million, which is actually a really good steal. Now Gourde, over the past 4 seasons, have been in Seattle. His point production in Seattle keeps on going down. His first 2 years, he had 48 points in Seattle, but last year was a down year, having 11 goals and 33 points in 80 games. And then due to the injuries, this year he's had even less, putting up 6 goals and 17 points in 36 games. So it's not been an overly great season here from Gourde, but a lot of teams know that he's a really skilled 3rd or 4th line forward who can play center, can play wing, very versatile guy. He was key and instrumental to Tampa winning back-to-back cups. So what was it now, 4 or 5 years ago? So Tampa, more than anyone, knows what Yanni Gourde brings, and he's going back there. You place him on the 3rd line, you place him on the 4th line, that's going to be a massive improvement to a bottom 6 that did not have a whole bunch of help. So even though Gourde's not going to put up a whole bunch of points, he can provide some depth scoring, and he's the perfect playoff style player that the Tampa Bay Lightning needed at this point in time. So this is a pretty good pickup there for Tampa. And they also get Oliver Bjorkstrand. Now Bjorkstrand, just like Gourde, has been in Seattle for the past couple of years. He was traded by Columbus to Seattle after they signed Johnny Gaudreau a couple of years back. Last year was his best season in Seattle and his best season ever. He had 20 goals and 59 points in 82 games. This year it's on a little bit of a downward trajectory, only having 16 goals so far and 37 points, but it seems like he's going to hit the 20 goal mark again, probably hit around the 45 point mark this year. So all in all, it's been a really decent year from Oliver Bjorkstrand. He signed for this year and next year at $5.4 million. So Bjorkstrand isn't just a rental like Gourde is. Bjorkstrand's going to be with this team for next year's playoff run as well for Tampa. So pretty dang good addition there for Tampa. Now as a Sens fan, I hate this. All I wanted was Tampa to go down lower in the standings, miss the playoffs, and they're going to make the playoffs again. And some people are even saying that after these acquisitions, they may be the East favorite. So interesting note there. But Bjorkstrand, so far this year, has 16 goals and 37 points in 61 games. Very likely to hit the 20 goal mark again, which would be his 4th consecutive year of doing so. So this is a really interesting move. The Bolts had some cap space to be able to make moves this year, and boy, do they hit home on a massive one. So Bjorkstrand's going to be a solid top 6 guy, Gourde bottom 6 guy, and that's going to drastically improve the Tampa Bay Lightning's depth. So interesting note there. From the Kraken side of things, Gourde is a very likely trade candidate given the fact that he was pending UFA. We've heard Bjorkstrand's name a couple of times. He was actually 25th on the end-to-end hockey trade bait list. So he's now off the board. I'm going to have to try and do some rearranging when it comes to my trade bait board after this trade. But interesting note there that Bjorkstrand has indeed been moved. Even though he had a year left on his contract, Bjorkstrand's been one of the better Kraken forwards, so I wasn't expecting him to get moved given the fact he's still out of term, but Seattle obviously saw a trade that they couldn't refuse, so they moved him. They moved Gourde. They also moved a 5th round pick, which isn't overly bad. The return is monumental. They get a 2025 2nd round pick, which is Toronto, so very likely to be a lower end 2nd round pick, but still add some more draft capital for this year. They also get a conditional 2026 and 2027 first round pick. Conditions are top 10 protected, as Tampa usually does. If Tampa's pick does wind up being in the top 10 in either of those years, the draft pick will slide down to an unprotected one the year after. And the interesting thing to note about those two things is if the draft pick in the first round does slide down a year, the Kraken will get an extra 3rd round pick. So if the 2026 one falls down, the Kraken will get a 3rd round pick in the 2028 draft. If they both wind up falling down, then the Kraken will get 2028 and 2029 3rd round pick. So it's very unlikely that that will happen, but if it does, the Kraken could get upwards of 5 draft picks in this trade. That's outstanding piece of work there from Ron Francis. I know some people don't like Ron Francis and the moves he's made, but still, I think this one, you gotta give him credit where credit's due. This was a massive move for the Kraken, and they also got a decent bottom six forward and Michael Eyssimont. Eyssimont is 28 years old. He's a pending UFA, will wind up being a UFA at the end of the year unless the Kraken bring him back. So far this year has 5 goals and 10 points in 57 games after he had a career high 11 goals and 25 points in 81 games last year. So really good player there for the Kraken. He could fit in really well in like the bottom six. That's a pretty good pickup there for the Kraken as they get Michael Eyssimont. But man, this is a massive move between the Kraken, Bolts, and to some extent the Red Wings too. But that was the Blockbuster deal. We do also have 2 other trades to talk about, both involving the Pittsburgh Penguins. The first one is a smaller deal, and the trade is as follows. The San Jose Sharks have traded a 2028 5th-round pick to the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for Vincent Desharnais. Now, this is an interesting deal. We know that Desharnais has been bouncing around. He was signed in Vancouver in the offseason, dealt as part of the Marcus Pearson deal about a month ago to the Pittsburgh Penguins, and now he's going to San Jose. So he's been on the move quite a bit lately. It seems like Pittsburgh didn't really see a fit with Desharnais long term, so they give him to San Jose. San Jose has a need for another defenseman. He's going to be probably like a solid third, maybe even second pair of defenseman on the Sharks blue line. He so far has 3 assists in 44 games with the Penguins and Canucks combined, so he's not doing overly good compared to last year when he had a goal and 11 points in 78 games with Edmonton. But still, he's a really tall, rough and tumble guy. He can definitely lay the body. He won't put you up a whole bunch of points, but is a really good defensive-minded guy, so it's going to help the Sharks. He's also a very good veteran, and if he does well enough next year, I could see him be a trade candidate flip at next year's trade deadline. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but the Sharks will get Desharnais. For the Penguins, getting a 5th-round pick for a depth defenseman is not overly bad. The pick is way down the road, so the Sharks might be a good team by then. But still, I think this is a really good pickup there for the Penguins, even though it's not an overly big addition. So all in all, Sharks get a depth defenseman in Vinny Desharnais, and the Penguins get a 5th-round pick in return. And the other deal was a way more surprising deal for the Pittsburgh Penguins, as they made a trade with another seller in the Nashville Predators. And the trade is as follows. The Nashville Predators have acquired Michael Bunting and a 2026 4th-round pick from the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for Luke SChenn and Center Novak. So this is an interesting deal for both sides. Luke SChenn was 31st on my end-to-end hockey trade bait list, so he's now gone. I might keep him on because I don't think he might be done with the trading. I think there's a very likely chance the Penguins might flip SChenn, but it's an interesting trade for both sides. So for the Predators, Novak, he was in the first year of a 3-year deal. He's on the younger side of things, so I'm a little bit confused as to why the Predators did move on from him, but it does free up $3.5 million in cap space, which is really good. And SChenn was a guy who was heavily speculated to be on the trade block, so I'm not too surprised to see SChenn get moved. Predators in return get a 2026 4th-round pick, not an overly significant pick, but it does help the Predators get some more draft capital. And the player that they get in this deal is Michael Bunting. Bunting has had one heck of a past couple of years. He signed in Carolina, not this past offseason, but the offseason prior. Then he was dealt last year's at the trade deadline to Pittsburgh, and then he was dealt this year at trade deadline to Nashville. So he's been bouncing around a lot. He's a 29-year-old winger. He's in the 2nd year of a 3-year deal with a $4.5 million. So far this year has 14 goals and 29 points in 58 games, which isn't overly bad. Not anywhere close to his career highs of 49 and 55 he had over the past 2 seasons, but he's still doing pretty good compared to some of those other players on the Penguins roster. So I think in Nashville he'll be a solid top 6 forward. He'll be able to play with some of those top end guys like Forsberg, O'Reilly, Stamkos, guys like that. I think he can be a really good fit. He's shown it in the past. He can be a really good gel type guy who can fit in their top 6 and play with those good players. So I think this could be a really good pickup there for the Predators. And if he doesn't fit in overly well and he does quite good next year, I think they could try and deal him again at next year's deadline with him having his contract expiring at that point. So interesting note there. And then we saw the 2 players go to Pittsburgh are interesting as well. So the Penguins, they move off of Bunting, who Kyle Dubas really likes, but I guess he didn't really see a fit long term for him, and a 4th-round pick, and they saw an opportunity to get a couple of interesting pieces. So they get Center Novak. He's only 27 years old. He's a center. He's in the first year of a 3-year, $3.5 million deal. There was a lot of talk about Novak getting dealt last year at the deadline, but he wound up signing an extension instead. Last year had a career high 18 goals and 45 points in 71 games with Nashville. So far this year, not as productive as he was the past couple of seasons. In 52 games, has 13 goals and 22 points, so he's on pace for around the same goal total, but he's probably on pace for a couple of points less. So interesting move there from the Penguins. I guess they feel like Novak could be the 3rd-line center for the current team, and when Malkin eventually does retire or goes to play in the KHL, whatever he does, Novak Novak could be a solid second line center for that team because he signed for a couple more years and is on the younger side of things. So I think that could be a really good pickup there for the Penguins. The other interesting piece there that they got on this deal was the number 31 person on the trade bait board that I have, and that is Luke SChenn. SChenn, who's 35 years old, is in the second year of a 3-year deal with AV of $2.75 million. He can fit on pretty much any team's second or third pair units on the defensive end. Now, so far this year, only has 1 goal and 5 points in 61 games, after he had a goal and 7 points in 63 games the year prior. So he's not going to put you up a whole bunch of points, but is a very solid guy who I think can work out on a sort of role like a Pittsburgh Penguins have. But I wouldn't say that Luke SChenn is guaranteed to stay in Pittsburgh. This sort of screams to me like a potential player who could be flipped. I wouldn't be overly shocked to see the Penguins flip SChenn for maybe like a draft pick or a draft pick and a prospect before the trade deadline on March 7th. So definitely stay tuned for that. I wouldn't rule out that fact at all. So keep your eye on that, as I think there's a very likely chance SChenn could get flipped. But it's interesting for the time being, at least, that he's in Pittsburgh. So definitely some interesting trades. I do think at this point in time, the people who I think won this deal, so I think in the Tampa-Seattle deal, I do think Seattle won that because 2 first-round picks for Bjorkstrand and Gourde is just insane. So I do think that the Kraken do win that deal, although Tampa does get a pretty solid upgrade on their forward group. I do think that the Penguins do wind up winning the Desharnais deal, because I do think at this point in time, a draft pick, especially a 5th-rounder, is a lot more valuable than Desharnais is. And I do think at this point in time, the Penguins also win the Luke SChenn deal, because they do have SChenn right now. He could be flipped for another thing in a couple of days, and they get a solid young center in Thomas Novak. So definitely, I'll have to hear who you guys thought won these deals, and what did you think of the Greenway extension. Definitely, I'll hear your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk about for today. Until like this video, if you'd like to subscribe below. Thank you for all your support. We're never too without you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment down in the comment section below, discussing all that I was discussing in today's video. Also a blog, current news, rumors, analysis. If that's want to check that out, I'll link that down in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.